The Society of Women Engineers is celebrating Women's History Month by exploring some fun stories found in its archives. Today, let's talk about Elsie Eaves. Born in 1898, Elsie Eaves was determined to become an engineer, even though that really wasn't a thing women did back at the turn of the 20th century. Nevertheless, she enrolled at the University of Colorado, joined the women's basketball team, and in 1918 she became the first woman elected president of the college's engineering society. She graduated with a civil engineering degree in 1920, and in the years following, she taught engineering mathematics at the university, checked construction costs at the Colorado State Highway Department, and worked for a consulting engineer. But in 1926, she was ready for a change. She tried to get a job in New York at the Engineering News Record, a weekly engineering and construction magazine. Although initially told that she should look for a job at Macy's department store instead, she eventually landed a job as an editorial assistant. Elsie Eaves was on her way. She was quickly promoted to Director of Market Surveys, and in 1927, she became the first woman successfully accepted as an associate member of the American Society of Civil Engineers, with full voting privileges. She was promoted to manager of the Business News Department at the Engineering News Record in 1932, leading the development of comprehensive construction cost indices and activity forecasts for the next 31 years. Between her work at the ENR and her prominence within ASCE, Eaves became one of the few nationally visible women engineers in America in the 1930s. High school guidance counselors, faculty members, and young women interested in engineering wrote to her for advice, and she gave that advice in spades. In a 1932 letter to a young woman considering changing her major from mathematics to engineering, Eaves explained, "I think any girl who tackles the job of cutting out an engineering career for herself has tackled a hard job, and she will face many discouragements." She continued later in the letter, "When I planned to study engineering, practically everybody advised against it. I believe this is an excellent plan for advisors to pursue. I would not recommend that you go ahead with engineering unless you want to so much that you can overcome every objection that anybody could raise." That might seem a bit harsh nowadays, but Eaves wanted to prepare her young correspondents for the realities of women's employment opportunities, especially during the Great Depression. And after receiving that advice, if they ignored it and pursued engineering anyway, she went out of her way to help them find jobs. And her advice did soften over the years as economic conditions improved in the 1930s and as women's career prospects improved during and after the Second World War. One of the women she offered advice to in 1951 was Ada Richardson, a young mechanical engineer unhappy in her job. I can't say whether Eaves' advice and support was the catalyst, but Ms. Richardson did eventually find a new job and a highly successful career. In fact, she's better known in SWE by her married name, Ada Pressman, a recipient of the SWE Achievement Award and a past president of the society. Eaves was a fixture within SWE for several decades, beginning at the founding meeting on May 27, 1950. Over the years, she lent her expertise to SWE's publications, her business acumen to SWE's operations, and the Board of Trustees. And in 1980, she became the very first fellow of the Society of Women Engineers. And she never stopped offering her support, advice, and opinions. Shortly before her passing in 1983, she was lobbying for SWE to provide babysitting services at its annual conventions. The rise of women in engineering was not something she could have predicted at the beginning of her career. But The success of women engineers today is due in part to Elsie Eaves and other pioneers who forged a path for women in engineering where there hadn't been one before. My dear Miss Eaves, we thank you.